Happy New Year! I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and today we are going to dive into new plants for 2024. So today's video we're going to look at some of the new annuals for 2024, and the nice thing with this list is I'm not only going to be telling you about these plants because we're adding them to the website and to our garden center, but also most of these plants I've had experience with over the past summer. We've gotten sample plants in from proven winners, so we've been able to trial and test these plants. So I'll be able to give you my feedback as far as how they did in my garden, how they performed, what I liked about them. Maybe there was things I didn't like about them, but we're going to be talking about these plants from personal experience, and hopefully that you'll find this information helpful when it comes to yourselves making decisions for what you want to plant in your containers and in your landscape here in 2024. So without further ado, let's dive into, I think we're going to talk about 15 or so new annuals for 2024. We've added far more than that, but I wanted to just kind of start off with talking about some of my favorites that did really well for me in my garden this year. So right off the bat, one of my personal favorites was the Supertunia Saffron Finch. And this is also, it's a proven winner variety. In the past, it was called Bee's Knees. So if you're familiar with the Bee's Knees, this would be the same plant. Just Proven Winners has named it Saffron Finch. What did I like about this plant? I loved the bold yellow coloration of this plant. So we do have a lot of yellows that we carry in the Supertunia family, but none of them are quite as vibrant or as beautiful, in my opinion, as the Saffron Finch. So you'll be seeing we're going to be doing a lot more with that here in 2024 in combinations and such that we'll be putting together even out in the landscape and such. So really excited to bring to you the Supertunia Saffron Finch this year. It's a perfect yellow. So sometimes yellows can be a little soft or a little orange or just I don't know, not the perfect yellow. But I feel like the Saffron Finch is the perfect yellow that goes well with just about every flower color that I've tried mixing it with. It does have a nice vigorous habit. Now this information I'm going to say next is it gets 4 to 12 inches tall and up to 24 inches wide. So you're probably thinking, Heidi, 4 to 12 inches, that's way different. It's going to depend on the application that you use it in, and it also is going to depend on how long it's been planted in your garden or in your containers. So it's a nice plant that can be planted, like I said, not only in a container or hanging basket or window box, but it also does really well in a landscape planting as well. So in your hanging baskets or your window boxes, it's going to do more of a trailing type habit, where if you have it in the landscape, it's going to do more of a sprawling type habit. So it's going to cover a lot of ground if you do plant it in the ground. With petunias or supertunias, we do recommend that they get fertilized weekly for the best performance. If you don't fertilize them, I mean, they'll be fine. But with all annuals, we do recommend that they get fed at least once a week. Kind of the saying is, feed them and they'll be fabulous. So think of yourself. I mean, you can't live on water alone. You need to be fed as well to do well. And that is the same with flowers. So once a week, give them a nice application of a water-soluble fertilizer. And I think the results you're going to see is just, it's going to be amazing. So Supertunias like to be planted in full sun to part shade areas. We find that the more sun they get, the more vigorous they are, but they do fine in our part shade areas as well. Also, another thing to point out with Supertunias, and this is true of all the Supertunias that we carry, is they're self-cleaning. So what does that mean? A lot of you might be thinking to yourself, oh no, Heidi, I am not going to be planting a petunia because all I can remember is my grandma in her garden picking at those petunias to keep them looking good. Well, that's not the case with these Supertunias. They're a vegetative variety. They do not come from seed. So those old varieties that you're picturing your grandma picking, they were seed varieties. So they had to be picked at to keep them from going to seed, to keep the flowers going. But these guys here, they are just going to continue to bloom all summer long with very little maintenance. I mean, basically just feed them, water them, and they're going to be fabulous. Next on the list is the Supertunia Pink Cashmere Verbina, and that did really well in our trials as well. So we planted that in the landscape as well as in some containers, and I do it both at the greenhouse and also in my home garden. That way they're in 2 different locations. It just kind of gives us better, I mean, if they're in 2 different areas, 2 different growing conditions realistically, so we can just do a better trial on that plant. One thing to say about the Supertunia Pink Cashmere is it's a very aggressive verbena, which is great. You just want to make sure that when you're planting it with other varieties of annuals that are also aggressive. So think bubblegum, the Vista bubblegum or the Vista jazzberry, even the hoopla, the new hoopla. All of those, they will be able to grow well as a companion plant here with the Pink Cashmere Verbena. The Pink Cashmere has extra large pink blooms. They're kind of a medium to soft pink. Typically in the past, the largest of the verbenas in the Supertunia family, the largest flowers, were the violet ice and the whiteout. So if you've grown those in the past, this Pink Cashmere is an even bigger, larger flower than those 2. So it blooms all summer long. Again, does not need to be deadheaded. Pairs well, like I said, with Vista bubblegum, Vista jazzberry, hoopla, Vivid Orchid. Hardy in zones 8 to 11. So for most of us, it's going to be an annual. It's going to die in the fall. But for some of you that are in the warmer areas, you may find that it may overwinter for you. So if it does, that's great. You get to enjoy it longer than those of us here in the north. But we do sell it as an annual because for the majority of the country, it is going to die at the end of the summer season. It likes to be planted in full sun to part shade locations. And like I mentioned, it did great for us in our containers as well as in the ground. So you really can't go wrong, I don't think, with where you would want to plant this new variety. Next on the list is a coleus, and it's part of the Color Blaze series, and it's called Color Blaze Cherry Drop. So the drop series, the name kind of implies a trailing coleus opposed to an upright coleus. So you may be familiar with chocolate drop or strawberry drop. Cherry drop is the newest in that series. It has bold leaf coloration with shades of chartreuse, burgundy, even some bright red. It's got heavily serrated, smaller size leaves, but really adds beautiful color and texture to not only the landscape, but to container combinations as well. It has a mounding trailing habit, so I planted it in, I had some 24-inch aqua pots, and it definitely trailed probably about 18 to 24 inches. In our landscape, we planted it, we did a grouping of 3 of them, and with those 3 plants, it covered about a 5-foot spread. So we found that this cherry drop is very vigorous, more so in our opinion than the strawberry drop or the chocolate drop. So when you're planting the Color Blaze Cherry Drop coleus, less is definitely more in my opinion, because it could take over other plants in your combination if you go ahead and plant too many of them in one spot. It gets about 14 to 18 inches tall and spreads about 24 inches wide. Like I mentioned, we have 3 of them planted in a grouping that got upwards of 5 foot across. So one plant does cover a lot of ground. It can be planted in full sun to full shade areas, so very versatile as far as the location of where you're planting it. We do find though that if it gets more sun, in our opinion, you're going to have a nicer, brighter, more bold coloration on that plant. Coleus are deer resistant and are an excellent choice not only for your containers and your hanging baskets, but it's also a very wonderful landscape plant. Use it as a ground cover if you've got little areas you just want to fill in with a splash of color. Definitely the Color Blaze Cherry Drop coleus would be a good plant for that type of a location. Next on the list is the Safari Dusk James Britannia. So we've had these for a few years now. The Dusk is a new color in the series. There's Safari Dawn and Safari Sky. And we've used them in a few applications in hanging baskets and such, but this is the first time that we've really used it in the ground planting or as a landscape plant, and it did fabulous in the garden. So the James Britannia are typically more of a southern plant. They love the heat, so they're very heat tolerant. But for those of us in the north, we can grow them as well. But for those of you in the south that are looking for kind of one of those go-to annuals, this might be something that you would use. So the Safari Dusk has kind of like a button size, like a small button size lavender blue blooms. If you use like Bacopa or Cetera in your hanging baskets or in your planters, this would be a great substitute for that plant. The problem with the Bacopa is if you let that dry out at all, it's going to take up to 3 weeks to generate new flowers. Where the James Britannia, if it dries out, it bounces back with a good watering. So it's very heat tolerant, like I mentioned. So for those of you in the south, this is a great plant for southern gardeners. It gets about 6 to 12 inches tall and spreads about 2 foot wide or so. We used it in baskets, like I mentioned, in our garden center when we were creating some different combinations. And this was the first time that we used it in the landscape as a landscape plant, and it covered a lot of ground. It did really great in the landscape. So if you're looking for something to kind of fill in an area that's a little bit more dainty flower size, you can use petunias. They're a nice big flower. But if you're looking for something with more of a dainty flower size to fill in an area, Safari Dusk might be a great plant for you. So they're drought tolerant. They do not like their feet wet, so you want to make sure you're planting it in an area that's got good drainage. It does bloom all summer long with no deadheading needed, so really easy to grow and really gives you the reward of flowers all summer long. Now, that being said, if you do have these in a hanging basket or in a container and you feel like, they're not blooming maybe as much as what they did earlier in the summer, they may benefit from a light haircut, so trimming off maybe about 1/3 or so of the plant. And what that would do is that would encourage more growth, more branching, which in return will provide you with more flowers. Again, something that does not need to be done, but you may find that will benefit your plant if you feel like it is slowing down a little bit with its flower production. All right, next we're going to head into some begonias, and I think a lot of you are going to be familiar with these as being called Rer begonias. This is a new series for proven winners. It's the Selenia series, and it's got apricot, cherry orange, scarlet, and yellow. So 4 different colors in this series. Rer begonias, they are a begonia that's a cross between a wax begonia and a tuberous begonia. So these usually work really nice in the landscape. They get about 8 to 12 inches tall and 8 to 12 inches wide. Nice little mounds of color that you can use in the landscape. But they also do really good in hanging baskets as well. So you can't go wrong with where you are choosing to plant these in your gardens or in your containers. The begonias bloom all summer long. Again, no deadheading needed. Nice large flowers. They can handle sun or shade, so versatile. Like my mind always tells me, like typically begonias are a shade plant, but these particular begonias do well in sun or shade. So great for hanging baskets, window boxes. You can plant them in the ground. We recommend watering them regularly, but don't let them stay too wet. You want to make sure that they are having nice, well-drained soil where you're planting them in. Next on the list is a Bidens, and this is the Campfire Marshmallow Biden. And the Bidens have come a long ways over the last few years or so. Typically the Bidens were fairly sparse with their blooms and didn't seem to bloom well throughout the summer. But this new series, the Campfire series, which is new meaning it's been around for a few years or so, marshmallow being the new color, which is white, as you would probably think with the name marshmallow. So they have large white daisy looking blooms that have a nice yellow eye. They're a prolific summer bloomer, nice mounding habit. They're heat tolerant. They like to be planted in well-drained soil. They get about 8 to 14 inches tall and about 20 inches wide, so they form a nice mounding type habit. They like to be grown in sun to part sun locations, and they're a nice plant too if you're looking to attract the pollinators to the garden, the butterflies and the bees and such. So you can mix in the bidens with, I would not recommend planting them with aggressive annuals, because the aggressive annuals could probably take them over in a container. So if you want to create kind of a mixed look, use it with some plants that are not super aggressive. That way you'll be able to enjoy these all summer without them getting just kind of gobbled up by more aggressive plants. Also new this year, there are 4 new Super Bells, and they are all part of the Double Super Bell series. I'm gonna talk about them, but I'm also gonna say that availability on these might be a little light this year. So if you can find them, make sure to get them reserved if it's something you're looking for your garden or your containers. So the first one we're going to talk about, because I don't know, there's a lot of really pretty ones this year, but we're going to talk about the first one, which is the Double Smitten Pink. So it's a beautiful light pink color. It's got kind of a deeper pink center, so kind of a nice bicolor. And these are little like rosebud looking blooms. They're probably about an inch or so across, so fairly small in size, but really a prolific bloomer, so you get lots of flowers on one plant. And I love the bicolor pinks of the Double Smitten Pink. Also this year there is the Super Bells Double Redstone, and that is a vibrant red with a nice yellow piquetty edge. Plant it with, you know, reds, purples, yellows, but I don't know, I do love the red and the yellow combination together. Very vibrant. I would say of the 4 that we're introducing, this one is probably the least vigorous of all 4 of them. So again, when you're planting it, you're going to want to plant this particular one with varieties that maybe aren't quite as vigorous, but the flower color is fabulous. Next on the list is Double Vintage Coral, and I kept calling this antique coral, or when I was doing videos this summer, because the color to me just looked antique-y. And it's funny because when I was talking to other people too, they're like, yeah, it's not called antique coral, and I'm like, no, it's vintage coral, which vintage and antique are kind of interchangeable words. But it's a beautiful antique coloration with shades of amber, orange, there's a little bit of red veining in there. It's unlike any of the other Double Super Bells that we carry. It's truly a unique coloration, and typically this isn't my color palette that I go to, but this plant, it did fabulous in the containers and in the landscape, and I really do think I'm becoming more of an orangey type flower person. It's something I need to admit to myself, but beautiful, beautiful flowers. And then the 4th one on the list is just very white. It's Super Bells Double White. So how do you explain white? It's a very crisp, clean white double flower. And if you're looking to add that splash of color to your combinations, let's say you've got a bold pink and a bold purple or something, and you just want to add a nice white that really sets those other colors off, I think double white would do that for you. And I like, with the doubles in general, the dimension that they add, because they are, you know, multi-petaled flowers opposed to just the singular, more flat looking Super Bells. So I do think that the double series do add a lot of dimension when you're mixing it in with other plants for combinations. One thing I will say with Super Bells is Super Bells do prefer to be planted in hanging baskets or containers. They're not best suited in the ground, and the reason is they do not like to have wet feet. So in your containers and in your baskets and stuff, you can kind of control the amount of water that you're giving them, where in the ground a lot of times plants stay a little bit more moist than they do in containers. So we don't really recommend putting the Super Bells in the ground, although we have done it and they've done okay. For the average gardener, I think going into a container would be my recommendation. The next plant we're going to look at is a sun patient, and for those of you who have watched videos that I've done throughout the summer, you'll find that we do a lot with sun patients. And the reason why is sun patients are they're so easy to grow and to take care of in the landscape. So Sun Patient's Compact Red Candy is a new variety. It's got bright pink flowers with cherry red stripes, so a nice bicolor bloom. They like to be grown in full sun to part shade locations, and as I mentioned, they're really easy to grow and care for. The biggest thing with Sun Patients is keeping them well watered. So they'll let you know if they're thirsty, because they will kind of get that wilty look on them where they just kind of blah. But go ahead and give them a nice good soaking of water and they'll perk right up for you in no time. And the other thing with Sun Patients too is if you're somebody who isn't maybe the best at fertilizing, Sun Patients really don't require a lot of fertilizer, if any at all. So they're easy. Water is the main thing you need to remember with the Sun Patients, is to keep them good and hydrated. Next on the list is another Supertunia, and this is the Supertunia Hoopla Vivid Orchid. When we first received these plants last spring, Rod and I were doing a video on them, and he was not sure about this plant. He thought it was not his favorite at the time. But I do think that it did start to grow on him as the summer went along and as the plants filled out and did their thing. He may still not say it's his favorite, but the color of it did definitely grow on him, and he was beginning to like it more and more. So Supertunia Hoopla Vivid Orchid. So the Hoopla series is a new series of Supertunia, and it's the pattern of the plant. So I think we'll see others down the road in the Hoopla series. And what this one is it's got a bright orchid purple bloom, but it's got a white piquete edge. So basically it's framed in white. One thing we did notice is as the summer went along and as it got warmer, is that white piquete edge on many of the flowers got thicker and wider. So instead of it being just a thin little border on the edge, that border got thicker and thicker. So that was kind of neat to see, because I mean, not every flower had that thicker band, so there was a little bit of variation, but that was really neat to see how that plant kind of changed a little bit once we got a warmer days. It does like to be grown in sun to part sun locations. It was a great plant for us not only in the ground but also in containers. As we mentioned earlier with the Supertunias, we do recommend that they get fertilized at least once a week. Feed them and they'll be fabulous. And you know, some people say, well, if you're planting plants and you need to keep the fertilizer on them, that kind of makes those plants like high maintenance, doesn't it? No, it doesn't. I mean, think about yourself. You can't live on water alone. You need food, and that's the same with plants too. So pick your day. Maybe your day is Saturday that you go out and fertilize all your plants. Just make it a habit, make it a routine, and your plants will certainly reward you for the care and the love that you're giving them. Supertunia Hoopla Vivid Orchid also is another Supertunia, because remember we said all of these do not need to be deadheaded. They're sterile varieties, and you don't need to do any deadheading. They'll continue to just bloom all summer long for you. One thing you might notice, and again here I just said you don't need to do anything, you don't need to deadhead them, but on occasion if you are planting like a hanging basket or a container, you may find around midsummer that the plants are just getting kind of long and all the flowers are at the bottom. One reason for that is you might be somebody that didn't fertilize. So if that is the case, you can go ahead and give them a light trim by trimming about a third or so off the bottom of the plants. And what that's going to do is that's going to encourage new growth, which will encourage branching, which in turn rewards you with more flowers. So if you didn't do a good job fertilizing and you do feel that those plants need to have a little trimming on them, you can go ahead and give them a little trim and they'll thicken up, fill out, and get you more flowers. Next on the list, it's more of a foliage type annual, and it's the Sweet Caroline Sweetheart Mahogany. So sweet potato vines typically are used in hanging baskets, planters, window boxes, kind of things. But they also can be used in the landscape. So I don't know if when you're thinking of them, you're thinking more in a container, or if you're somebody that thinks of them being in the landscape. But for us, we trialed them in both locations, and they did great in both applications. So Sweet Caroline Sweetheart Mahogany has heart-shaped coppery red leaves, really a beautiful coloration of foliage. They have a nice mounding trailing habit, so they get about 6 to 16 inches tall by about 36 inches long or wide, depending on where you're planting them. Again, 6 to 16 inches sounds like a big gap in height, but that's going to vary based on early season and late season. They like to be planted in full sun or in full shade, so they're very versatile as far as where you're planting them. We do find though that you will probably have a little bit better coloration, a little bit more vibrancy or boldness to the foliage color if they are getting some more sun. So you'll also probably notice in more sun, they're going to also be more vigorous as well. So if they're in the shade, they may not get quite as big as if they were in a sunny spot. Sweet potato vine are drought tolerant, and they're a great trailer for our spiller in containers. So if you're looking to, have this beautiful, just massive foliage in the front, they definitely would do that. This is a plant too, if you're planting it in a basket or a container, less is more, because one plant does a lot. It's gonna give you a lot of foliage. Sometimes what I have to do in my containers is about halfway through the summer, I'm like, oh, this planter is just totally sweet potato vined out. I'll go in and I'll trim some of the branches off the sweet potato vine, thin it out a little bit. That way I have better ratio of flower and foliage, because I don't want a planter that's just fully sweet potato vine. Also too, it's a great ground cover. You can use it in your landscape beds if you just got little spots that you want to add pokes of color. It's a nice, it kind of mingles well in the landscape and will give you beautiful coppery coloration if you're just looking to break up that green a little bit in your gardens. The next plant, we can't, have a year without a mini Vista. And this year it is Supertunia Mini Vista Ultramarine. So what does Mini Vista mean? So you've heard of, the Supertunia Vista petunias and Supertunia Mini Vista petunias. So the Mini Vista petunias typically have a little bit smaller flower to them. The habit seems just a little bit thicker, tighter, a little bit lower growing to the ground if you're planting them in the ground. Everybody knows with Vistas, like Vista bubblegum, that's a great landscape plant. And so mini Vistas as well are great landscape plants. They do really well. Mini Vista Ultramarine, the color of that is a rich royal purple color. So if you've ever grown Supertunia Royal Velvet, this color matches Royal Velvet really closely. So if you're trying to just figure out what the exact purple color is, Royal Velvet would be very close to what Ultramarine is. Like I mentioned, it has smaller flowers, tighter, more compact type habit. Great in containers, as well as a great low growing ground color. It likes to be planted in full sun to part sun areas. No deadheading is needed, so you don't need to pick at the flowers to keep it going all summer long. This isn't your grandma's petunia. Sometimes you might find, again, if you are somebody that didn't fertilize very well, that it could benefit from a light trim midsummer. Again, the trimming creates more branching, which in turn leads to more flowers. Mini Vista Ultramarine is a great plant for attracting butterflies and hummingbirds to the garden. So if you are looking for a plant that would be inviting to the pollinators, petunias definitely are a great pollinator plant. Ultramarine, the color of it, it's a great purple that pairs well with just about any flower color. I think purple is really very versatile. It's like white. It just goes with everything. Pinks or reds or oranges. They all look really nice together. And the last one on the list, this one is actually a improved variety. So Verbina Royal Cherry Burst has been around for several years, and they've improved it. And the improvement is kind of interesting, actually. So in the past, you would have red and white striped flowers, and on occasion, and fairly rare occasion, you'd have a bloom that was kind of more like a solid peach color. Well, that was a problem to people because, you know, it wasn't what they thought it was supposed to be. They were expecting a plant that was solid, kind of that pinkish, reddish, and white striped. And when they'd get these rare occasions of having a peach come through, they didn't like that. Well, interestingly enough, the improvement is a plant that more consistently has those peach flowers breaking through. So we're going to pop some pictures up on the screen and you'll see what I mean here with the variation. The thing I like about it is, I mean, I love the pinkish red stripes, but I do like those peachy color blooms that are just kind of sporadically throughout the plant as well. They pair well together, the colors look good together, and it almost makes you feel like you're getting two plants in one because of the different variations that the flowers are within one plant. So if you were somebody that didn't like those peach random plants or random flowers occurring, it's going to happen a lot more here now on this new Royal Cherry Burst. But for those of you that thought that was kind of cool, you're going to be impressed with this improved version where you're going to see a lot more of that. So I think it's personal preference there, but personally I think in our trials I did like how it looked. If you have any questions on any of the new plant varieties for 2024 that we talked about today, don't hesitate to leave us a message in the comments below. There are far more annuals than what I talked about that are new for this year, so I will be putting a link below also to all of the new annuals for 2024, so you can go ahead and just take a peek at all of the new varieties, because I don't know if you're like me, I like to be the first to have the new varieties and know what's new for this year. So we'll make sure to put that link below so that you too can be in the know of what is new for 2024. All of these plants are available on our website, gardencrossings.com. We'll put easy access links again below, so if there's something in particular you're looking for, the link will be below and you can just click on that link and head to our website. We are now in the pre-order stage of ordering. It is winter and we will start shipping end of March, beginning of April. Kind of depends on how the weather here is in Michigan. So that's when we start shipping for the 2024 season. So until then, we'll be bringing you these videos, giving you lots of inspiration so you can start making your wish list and start planning for your 2024 gardens. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.